Good morning guys, welcome to my unboxing and review of the Full Mechanics 1100 Raider Gundam. This is a 2022 standard release that I got for about $43 because I got it on a pretty steep discount. This kit normally retails for around $64, which is quite expensive. That puts it in a slightly premium master grade territory, at least for older master grades. For newer master grades, it's about average. That's in the same tier as things like the Astray Red Frame Kai, the Blue Frame D, or whatever it was called, the one with all the swords, the Providence Gundam, the Justice Gundam. Anyway, all that's to say is this kit is priced in the same tier as some pretty nice master grades, and this kit is not a master grade. It is full mechanics, and this is the first full mechanics I've built. I have every full mechanics kit in the backlog except for the aerial. I have the aerial permit score 5, whichever one has the special new recolor finish. That's a little bit more pearlescent. So for all of the Bio CPU Gundams from Seed, I have all of the FM kits in the backlog or about to get here in the case of the Boost Raider. So I have the Calamity, Sword Calamity, Ale Calamity, the Forbidden, and the Boost Raider is coming at the time of recording in a couple of days. So this is the first one I'm taking a look at, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing what the full mechanics line is. In terms of design, I'll get out of the way now. Not the biggest fan of the Raider's design. I don't know what it is. It's always been a little bit weird to me. The Bio CPU Gundams have always not been the greatest. I like the body of the Forbidden, I don't like the giant flight unit thing it has on its back. The Raider's okay, but not great. I do like the Calamity. That's the only one of the three that I actually genuinely like quite a bit. So getting right into the box here, this is pretty similar to the somewhat recent, because it's been almost 10 years, Seed master grade style of box art, versus very kind of stylized art on the front, very painting style. If you see art for things like the Master Grade Justice Gundam or the Freedom 2.0, they look very similar to this, and I do love this style of box art. Of course, it's showing off a lot of the decals that are going to be coming on this kit. Unfortunately, they are all going to be sticker style decals, I believe, which the Raider is black as its main color, so it's not going to look all that great, unfortunately, and I don't like this design enough to get water slides for it, so I'm probably just going to deal with having stickers on it. So of course, getting onto the side of the box, we just get the full painted build of the Raider here, front and back, and information on the gimmicks of this kit for all the articulation, the open hatch gimmick to expose the cannon, a stand for the hammer. What is that called? The Mjolnir Hammer. Of course, it's called the Mjolnir Seed. The Mjolnir Hammer here, where it can open up and express a bunch of articulation gimmicks. You can have it standing on its own when the Raider is kind of throwing it out there as a weapon. And then, of course, all these articulation gimmicks over here, which is quite nice. I have heard the full mechanics kits are basically a hair short of being master grades proper. They're missing a couple of things like proper cockpit gimmicks, but apart from that, they're very nice kits, so I am excited to see that. And of course, on the other side here, you have some poses here showing the Raider kind of flinging out the Mjolnir Hammer, showing it transformed into mobile armor mode, and then of course having its buddy, the Full Mechanics Calamity Gundam, standing on top of it as a flight unit. Not the biggest fan of that being this kit's gimmick, just being a glorified chauffeur for the Calamity Gundam. So you'll probably see this kit again when I take a look at the Full Mechanics Calamity. That I actually do have water slides for because I do like the design. So excited to build that kit eventually. Inside the box, get 9 bags of runners, which is quite a bit. I guess the price tag is there for a reason. As well as this standard manual for the Full Mechanics Raider Gundam here. Of course, showing off the box art here. Pretty much identical because, again, the box is in vertical format, so not really much to crop or change the background of. On the back here, we get a lot of what we saw on the side of the box in terms of posing gimmicks, but we also get information on the weapons and the development of the Raider Gundam itself, as well as our color guide in full color here. So of course our weapons are going to include the Zorn energy cannon. I think I have too much Germa brain, right? Anytime I see Zorn in the context of C, I just snap back to the Streamer Life Simulator game. Anyway, of course you have your transphase armor, which is a development of the phase shift armor. You get your Mjolnir Hammer, your auto cannon inside of this hatch here that opens up in mobile armor mode. Of course, your Ahura Mazda plasma cannon, and then the cannon on the shield. And then some information on the Raider Gundam down here. It's going to be 17.94 meters tall, so in 1/100 scale, that means it should be pretty much in line with your standard master grade Gundam. Getting into the manual then, this manual is quite thick, but it also does have to cover the transformation sequence for this kit. So of course you get your parts list here, which seems quite nice. Then you get into the arms first, which is pretty unusual. Normally you start with the either head, torso, or feet. You very rarely start with the arms, but here you go, getting into this build. It seems a little bit simpler than a master grade, but still way more than I was expecting, because kind of going into this, I was half expecting it to be almost like the RU-100 gun cannon detector I took a look at, which was just a glorified high grade in 1/100 scale, but this seems pretty involved and quite nice, so very much looking forward to actually doing the build. So after you do that, you get into the torso here. Of course, there is not going to be a articulated cockpit hatch gimmick. I think that's like the main thing that these kits are lacking over master grades. Extra torso build seems a little bit simpler than a master grade, but still significantly better than the RE100 kits. You get into the head, which looks pretty typical, like pretty much master grade tier in terms of like part separation and stuff. Yep, of course this is a transformable mobile suit, so it has to be a whack-ass gimmick in the assembly. Here you put the front part of the head onto the neck joint and then assemble the back part like around it, which is a little bit odd, and then you put the arms on. Then you move on to the legs. The feet seem pretty typical, and the legs themselves seem like mostly master grade level. There seems to be plenty of articulation here. It does seem like, however, there is not a complete inner frame. You can see there's like a bunch of hollow parts in here. So I think that might also be a part that makes it fall short of being a master grade proper, some missing inner frame parts, but it still looks pretty nice as far as assembly goes, and I have heard that this is a very nice articulator. So again, excited to see how this all builds up. Then of course you build your skirts, talking about the gimmicks with the claws popping out for, I think, mobile armor mode. Yeah, again, looks pretty master gradey. Maybe a little bit less complex, but still pretty high quality. And of course you build your claws, then fully assemble the kit. Get into your backpack with the large wings there. Continuing on the backpack, then you move on to the weapons, the shield cannon and the Mjolnir, because all the other weapons are pretty much just like integrated into the mobile suit itself. So of course you get your shield cannon here. Looks fairly simple, but the end result should look quite nice. Then you get to the Mjolnir, looks quite good. And then you get into your Mjolnir display base, so you can have it kind of flying out separate from the Raider Gundam. Then of course you have your articulation gimmicks, and then showing off how to transform the kit. So pretty typical stuff for a transformable mobile suit to have the end be the transformation. You have some landing gear here if you want to just display the mobile armor mode without an action base. And then talking about how to kind of manipulate the mobile armor mode so you can have the Calamity stand there stably, which actually is pretty nice. I was expecting to need a second stand for that, but to have the gimmick kind of built in for this thing to just for the Calamity just to be able to stand on its back when it's horizontal, just like that, is pretty nice. And then you get into your decal guide here. Now the decals I do like the design of, is just, man, I wish they were water slides, because with how dark the color scheme of this kit is, the borders are going to be so obnoxious. But anyway, getting into the contents of the bags. Inside the bags we get 17 runners, as well as this quite small foil color correcting sticker sheet that pretty much just has everything you would expect to see on a foil color correcting sticker sheet. You have metallic green stickers for eye cameras, head cameras, and the camera for the, I already forgot what it was called, the shield with the beam guns on it. Then of course you will also get this slightly crinkled a sheet of sticker style decals. Again, I love the way these decals actually look and how they're styled. I don't like that they're sticker style, because again, the Raider is mostly black. These borders are going to be obnoxious. And of course, you will also get this wire for using with the Mjolnir hammer, so you'll see that in the posing section. So as for the runners themselves, these runners were printed in May of 2022, starting with runner A here, a multicolored runner for the Raider Gundam, coming in 4 different colors. You get a lavender tinted gray here for parts for the Mjolnir hammer, as well as some accent parts, including parts for the torso. You get yellow parts here for some more accent parts for I think chest vents and the V-fin. You get a minty green color here for a number of different accent parts, as well as parts for the head. You get clear green here for the eyes, which is nice that they're color separated, so you may not even need to use the metallic stickers on this kit. Runner B here in black, going to be a number of armor parts for all across the kit, including parts for the arms, the skirts, the torso, the head, etc. Runners C1 and C2 in black, C2 being a copy of the right part of C1, including a number of parts for the large wings for the backpack, parts for the torso. You see the kind of eye mask here for the head, very nice, it's color separated, parts for the arms, etc. You get 2 of runner D here in black, containing parts for things like the feet and I believe the legs. Runners E1 and E2, E2 being a copy of this lower part of E1, going to be labeled FM1100 GAT frame, so these are going to be shared across all 3 of the Bio CPU Gundams. So this is going to be in that lavender tinted gray that you saw for the Mjolnir. This is going to be a number of frame and joint parts for things like the hips, the legs, the shoulders, you see our hands, etc. Runners F1 and F2 are going to be part of a mega runner here, split into 2 parts, going to be in a slightly blue tinted, very dark gray, including frame parts for things like the hips, I believe, like maybe the shoulders. You see inner frame parts for the skirts. You see parts for the shield. You get 2 of runner G here in that lavender tinted gray for a number of different frame parts for all across the kit. I believe you also see some parts for the backpack for the large wings. I think these are parts for the shoulders, etc. Get runners H1 and H2, H2 being a copy of this lower part of H1, going to be a number of different frame parts in that same lavender tinted gray that we've been seeing all over the kit, including parts for, I believe, the torso, parts for the arms, and you see the large landing gear here that's going to be used in mobile armor mode if you don't want to put this on an action base. parts. You get runners I1 and I2 here in red, with a common part being here in the middle for parts for the backpack. So this is going to be all of the red parts all over the kit, which I think is going to break up the mostly black color scheme very nicely. And last but not least, we get runner CE1 here for the clear stand that we are going to be using for the Mjolnir hammer when it's flying separately from the Raider Gundam. Do kind of wish this came with a normal action base because, well, it's a transformable mobile suit that kind of warrants needing an action base to pose in the air flying around in mobile armor mode, and especially for the price, I think including a stand would have been warranted here. So, with all that out of the way, I will see you after the build. Alright, welcome back. Here's the full mechanics Raider Gundam, snap built, panel lined, well, some of it, because of how the kit's primary color is black, a lot of panel lining just wouldn't show up. I tried panel lining in gray, like some people suggest online, to panel line a slightly lighter tone to help it show up more, but the gray just wasn't really showing up on the black, so I just didn't bother doing it after a little bit because I just couldn't see it. If you have any better suggestions, let me know in the comments. And also, decaled up with the included sticker style decals, which, as expected, don't really look that great considering how dark the color scheme for this kit is. Some of them look okay, like the ones on the lavender gray here on the collar look okay, I guess. I crinkled it up a little bit, so that's a bit of an application error on my end. The logos on the red here look alright. Some of the stickers on the black actually look surprisingly okay. Like the ones on like the thruster there look passable, not great, but the decals, especially the ones with red on them, look pretty bad. So yeah, definitely if you like this design and you want it to look its best, get the water slides. These sticker style decals don't really cut it here. So getting right into the build. So while on the outside, the full mechanics line do resemble master grades and actually look pretty close to master grade quality in terms of the exterior performance, on the inside it is very much not that. So while it isn't full on like RE100 level where it's pretty much just a high grade scaled up to 1/100 scale, this is no master grade in terms of construction. I would say it sits kind of in between the two, as you might be able to see based on the time-lapse footage you should be seeing right now of me building the kit. In general, the kit is fairly simplified compared to a master grade, while the exterior is honestly pretty master grade tier in terms of like parts layering and complexity and things like that for just the exterior. The frame is very simplified, doesn't have a complete inner frame. For example, in the torso there is no cockpit or frame or anything like that, so the cockpit door, which would normally be several pieces to replicate a cockpit hatch opening gimmick, is just a single red piece that just kind of slots in because, well, you don't need to have the gimmick if there's no cockpit. The inner frame is not complete. It's mostly complete, but it's not fully complete. In places like the arms, it's very simplified, only being a few parts, where things like the lower forearm, which would normally be multiple parts that kind of like fit together, is a single part that the armor just kind of layers on top of, and it's pinned in place by the elbow parts. There are certain parts of this kit that do feel master grady. For example, the shoulders, which have a full transformation thing for the mobile armor transformation, which we'll talk about in a bit, is much more complex than a lot of other parts of this kit, but that is the exception and not the norm. In addition, things like the head are pretty much identical to what a master grade would be in terms of quality. It's missing maybe a little bit of detail in the inner frame, but it's a full mechanics kit. I don't think I can really fault it for that. And in general, this build is pretty nice and mostly solid. I say mostly because this is a seed design. Look at it. The backpack is very large and over the top, and that means this kit does have some balance problems standing up. It took a lot of finagling to get it even like in this kind of natural looking standing pose, and if I brush it a little bit the wrong way, this kit is bending over backwards. The torso has too much articulation backwards and cannot support itself if the backpack decides it wants to lean back a little bit. The build is pretty nice in general, except for, and this might just be a personal thing, I forget what they're called, the Mazda claw things on the back that kind of flip out when this kit is in mobile armor mode, or you can flip it out when it's in mobile suit mode. Those claws on the back are extremely tedious and annoying to build, and I'm really not looking forward to the Boost Raider, where I basically have to build 4 of them instead of just 2. But they do kind of have to be here for this to be an accurate Raider Gundam, so I feel like it's just kind of a necessary, annoyance that was going to happen with this design if you have a more, complex version of the Raider Gundam. So in general, build is mostly good, no polycaps, and it feels sturdy except for the backpack. I do wish they limited torso articulation a little bit more so it didn't really have that curving over backwards into a crescent moon shape anytime the balance gets a little bit out of whack, but that's neither here nor there. In terms of aesthetics then, we'll talk about the good before I get into my opinions on this design. In terms of actually like replicating the Raider Gundam at 100 scale, this kit is pretty identical to what a Master Grade would do in that regard. The exterior is very detailed, containing a number of extra details that were not present on the original line art and things like that, and it touches up the proportions to avoid the seed line art proportion weirdness, especially in something like the backpack there. The wings look very stubby in mobile armor mode in the line art. In the kit form, they look pretty natural, albeit very large. I will have to take this out of the booth to show it spinning around in the posing section. In addition, there are certain parts, especially in the accessories, like with the Mjolnir spherical breaker here, where you see there's just a ton of extra detail that definitely pops after you panel line it, but this detail wasn't here in the original line art. If you look at the line art, it literally just looks like a sphere with some spikes on it, even though it's supposed to have like thrusters and things like that. So the Mjolnir here does have everything modeled, the thrusters, all the vent details, all of that is great. In addition, there's a ton of frame layering going on here. So if you look at things like the red accents on the shoulders, the black there is part separated, that is frame poking out from underneath. The yellow parts in the chest are the same way. If you spin around, they even did the color accuracy thing with all the thrusters. So if you look at the thrusters on the legs there, the insides are all gray. There is a single thruster in the line art that does not have that, which is the big thruster on the backpack there that has a navy blue inner lining. That is replicated in this kit, and that's honestly pretty impressive. I really like that attention to detail, and in addition, I do like the general color scheme of this kit, black with red accents and a bit of mint accents and things like the face for the Zorn cannon and the Mazda claw things on the back. I forget the full name, I'm just going to call them the Mazda claws. See, in general, this kit is incredibly accurate aesthetically. And in terms of color correcting stickers, it's really only the usual suspects, being metallic camera stickers. Stickers 1 and 2 are for the eyes, stickers 3 and 4 are for head cameras, and sticker 5 is going to be for the camera on the shield here. So all of that is fine and to be expected. Nothing really to fault this kit on here. And in addition, the cameras are color separated for the eyes, including the eye mask and everything. So if you just wanted to paint the eyes metallic green and just not deal with the stickers, you can, and it's very easy to do. Now, in terms of what I don't like with this kit, now this is all opinion based. You can disagree with me all you want if you like this design. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it does look a bit goofy in places. I do like most of the body. I really like the legs. I like the torso. I like most of the waist apart from the claws. Hell, I even like the backpack. I do think it's one of the better over-the-top seat backpacks. I'm not the biggest fan when they're like the Ale Strike or something where it like juts out like an insane amount and it looks kind of weird. This kit also feels a little bit weird with how the backpack's like basically a jet docking with this thing. But what I really don't like are the proportions on the shoulders. I get that they do have to conceal machine guns in them, but they are very large and goofy looking in my opinion. In addition, I really don't like the face. Again, I don't know what it is. I like forehead cannons like with the double Zeta's high mega cannon. When it's a mouth cannon like the Zeong or what this has, it looks very odd to me. I like my standard Gundam muzzle with the ventilation slits. And I don't like how the claws look. I don't know what it is. I am not a fan of the way they're stored up just here behind the kit and how tall they are. It just doesn't look quite right to me. Also not the biggest fan of the minty color for them, but again, that's just personal preference. If you like this design, more power to you. It's just, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I really only got this for the comparison with the Boost Raider. We're going to take a look at that next week, but my opinions aside, this kit does a pretty much perfect job recreating the Raider Gundam in 1/100 scale in pretty much master grade quality for the exterior only. Everything is color accurate as you would expect. Now for a quick size comparison, here is the full mechanics Raider Gundam right next to a standard sized high grade being the high grade Blue Destiny Unit 1, and a standard sized master grade being the master grade Gem Sniper 2 White Dingo team. So as you can see here, the Raider Gundam is going to be a hair taller than the standard 18 meter tall Gem Sniper 2 over there, and it's going to take up even more space on your shelf if you have like the wings out on this, or if you have it swinging the Mjolnir spherical breaker, or if you have the claws out or something like that. This kit will take up plenty of space on your shelf, so be prepared for that. Especially with the wingspan of the backpack here, this kit will take up a lot of space on your shelf. I also think they did tweak the proportions a little bit, because I believe the Raider Gundam is supposed to be actually a little bit shorter than your standard 18 meter tall Gundam. It's supposed to be like 17.94, I want to say, or something. And as you can see there, it is like a hair taller than the Gem Sniper 2. So they did do some proportion tweaking, again, to get rid of the weirdness that all of the seed line art has, where all the kits or all the suits look really chunky. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. So in terms of accessories, here's the full mechanics Raider Gundam with everything it comes with. As you can see, this is a pretty full accessory spread, mostly consisting of adapters. So we'll go over them pretty quickly. But first, the hand options. These are going to be using swappable finger style hands, but the only hands you are supposed to use with this kit are the are these kind of normal holding hands. Now, the runners with the swappable finger style hands do come with alternate hands for this kit, but considering the Raider Gundam really only uses kind of standard holding hand style weapons like the shield and the Mjolnir over there, you aren't supposed to cut them out, you're supposed to use them, but you can if you would like. Now for our handheld weapon options, of course for the kit's right hand, you're going to be getting this shield. I forget exactly what it's called, but it contains the, trying to read this through the camera, the 52mm hypervelocity shield cannons, which are fine. It's your typical forearm-oriented shield, 2 barrels sticking out of it. Now the main, I guess, thing with this weapon is that in addition to having this little peg here that just clips into the forearm, you can also flip it back to have it as a handheld option if you want to show the Raider Gundam kind of using this as an offensive arm. You can have it held up aiming at a target. Now the only other thing to mention with this shield is that there's a bit of play here in the barrels, so the build is a tiny bit loose, so sometimes if you're handling it, occasionally your barrels can end up going like this and looking pretty unnatural, so just make sure to realign them properly if you want to have your Raider Gundam looking like it's firing the shield here. Then of course we have, in my opinion, the coolest part of this kit, the Mjolnir spherical breaker here. Now the cool part isn't necessarily the weapon itself, it's essentially a Gundam hyper hammer, because it's a ball with spikes on it on a handle, and it has a wire inside. Now, unlike most kits with wires, where you basically have to pick what length of wire you want as you're building the kit, and as you're figuring out how you want to pose it, you pick your one pose that you want, you cut your wire to that length, and that's what you have. This kit actually recreates a very cool gimmick with the hyper hammer here. So, of course, the wire extends, and of course you have this, and you can like pose it on this base here, so it'll just stand on the base, and you can have it in midair, the Raider Gundam mid-swing, that's all that good stuff. We've seen that before. What I don't know if we've seen before, and you can let me know in the comments if this has existed in another kit, I'm very interested to see if it has, is, well, the wire's out now, what do we do with it? Well, they actually recreated being able to reel the wire back in, which is really cool. Like, honestly, I wish more weapons would do this, where the wire's actually integrated into the kit in a really interesting way. Like this, that avoids you needing to like pre-cut the wire or whatever, limiting you in your posing options. You have so much freedom if you want to repose your Raider Gundam with how exactly you want to position the Mjolnir spherical breaker with this reelable wire. That's really cool. I love that they did this. They should do it with more kits if they haven't already. Like, it's such a well-engineered weapon that you wouldn't really expect it to be. Like, I think most people were just expecting this to be like 2 halves sandwiched together, maybe a part for the spikes and a couple of parts for the handle, but no. There's like a full-on, I mentioned it in the unboxing section, I believe. At the time of recording, it's been like a week since I filmed the unboxing. But I mentioned that the Mjolnir hammer looked surprisingly involved in the construction. That's because it was, because you have to build all of the interior, I guess, mechanics for winding and reeling in that wire, which is really cool that that's here. Love to see it. And the only thing I really don't like to see is this peg that's been jutting out here. This is just for mounting it onto the Raider Gundam's crotch there for when it's in mobile armor mode. But that's something I'm fine with, especially considering how cool it is that they integrated the wire mechanism into this weapon. And then the rest of the accessories here are all going to be adapters for various things, mostly action bases. So getting right into it, what I thought would be just the adapter for the Raider Gundam being on an action base is actually supposed to be for the Calamity Gundam. You get some landing gear for when it is in mobile armor mode, and if you want to show it on the ground, not in flight, you can connect it via these 2 little pegs here into this clear circular base for the Mjolnir stand here. And to mount it to the Raider Gundam, you will use this adapter piece that is also used for the Mjolnir. So if you want to show this on the base, you kind of just clip it onto the bottom of the Mjolnir. The peg from the little stand will go into this spot here, and you can just have your Mjolnir flying around. Also, because of the way the Mjolnir is mounted, it's on the bottom of the crotch, so you just stick this to the Mjolnir on the crotch, and then this will mount onto here, and you can have your Raider Gundam in mobile armor mode just on the ground if you don't want to pose it flying. Also, when it's in mobile armor mode, you have this adapter here that will fit onto the bottom in the Raider's, I guess, taint area underneath the kit, and that when it's in mobile armor mode, that will allow a stand to kind of go into the back horizontally, which is good if you're in like a flying pose and you want to show it doing anything dynamic. This is the adapter you're going to be using for that. In mobile suit mode then, you have this adapter here, which looks very odd. Where it will go is it will actually wedge into the backpack there, kind of like on the underside of it. It'll just kind of slot in there before you put it on the Raider Gundam, and then you can use this Then you can use this peg here to mount it onto an action base. You can also use this to, of course, pose the backpack flying separately, which I will try to do in the posing section, because, as you might imagine, with the weight problems I mentioned earlier, this kit is not going to be able to do a running and gunning pose with the backpack on. So this adapter is key for aerial poses in mobile suit mode or the backpack flying separately. Then you have these two boxes here. Now this is for the Calamity Gundam. Again, if you want to pose this kit doing its like main gimmick from the show, which is transforming and acting like a hoverboard for the Calamity to surf around on and shoot people, you have these two boxes here that help the Calamity get better footing. Now, I don't have the Calamity Gundam built to demonstrate this, but you'll see that when I eventually make that video to see how stable it actually is. The manual does say you need 2 full action base 4s with the 3 hexagonal bases all laid out to be stable enough to do that kind of thing. So we'll see. I don't have 2 full action base 4s, so we'll see if I can make do with like stealing some action base 1s or whatever. Make sure to sub and hit the notification bell so you don't miss that video when it comes out, by the way, if you want to see that. So accessory-wise, the Raider Gundam has essentially everything you would expect it to and a whole lot more in terms of the adapters and things like that. So getting into articulation then, I'm going, for the sake of convenience, I'm going to be removing the backpack because this kit's kind of a mess to handle when the backpack is on. For the backpack then, might as well, while I'm holding it, might as well get the articulation out of the way. Of course, the wings can rotate like so. They can also flip backwards like so, but I think that's mostly for the construction, and I don't really remember if the kit's supposed to just be able to do that like in any kind of posing. Of course, the wings can open up when in use. When the other side's opened up, it's actually wide enough that it literally doesn't fit in my photo booth, so that will have to be posed outside of it. In addition, this thruster here can rotate all around like so for more dynamic aerial flying poses, and of course, there is a gimmick where normally what would be the cockpit of any like conventional aircraft can open up and reveal an, I think, 80mm cannon inside. This essentially takes the place of a like Vulcan gun on most other mobile suits when this is in mobile armor mode, because I think the manual states that this is meant for use in dogfights and restricting MS movement, which is the role that the Vulcan guns typically follow when they are integrated into mobile suits. So it's cool that this is here. Getting into the Raider proper, I'm going to go over the articulation this kit has minus those used in the transformation. So for the head, without activating the neck thing for the transformation, it can look up a decent amount. It can look down almost into its own chest. You get some okay, if decidedly mediocre side to side tilts. It's actually kind of hard to articulate without articulating the abdomen, which is a little bit loose, but it's kind of, when the articulation gimmick is activated, you'll see that in a moment. And of course, the head can 360 about a ball joint. All pretty typical stuff. The neck is on a hinge, but that's for the transformation. And the shoulders then, for shoulder swing. The entire assembly can swing out a bit to get a much more decent shoulder swing than you would normally be able to get. You can get also a swing backwards if you want. The shoulder, in addition, can articulate independently of the arm, but you see it's starting to come apart there because that kind of articulation is mostly for the transformation. So that allows the arm then. So I don't know if it'll make it into the video, but the arm just went flying across the room. But the arm can get a little bit over 90 degrees before it wants to pop off the peg in the shoulder. For the rest of the arm articulation then, the arm is going to, of course, be able to 360 in the bicep. A double bend in the elbow will give you over 135 degrees before it collides with the shoulder armor. And of course, the wrist is going to be on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things. There's also a secondary joint here in the cuff that allows for a little more natural flexing of the wrist, but apart from that, doesn't not really do all that much. The thumb itself is also going to be on a ball joint, typical swappable finger style fashion. In the torso then, you get almost no articulation until you activate the mechanism where you kind of pull the torso out, which enables you to get a bit of an okay ab crunch there. You will get some pretty good side to side crunch, and you will unfortunately get some pretty good back crunch, which is unfortunate because of how heavy the backpack is. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this kit does have some balance issues with the backpack on because of a bit of a weak torso there. Of course, being a full mechanics kit, there's going to be no cockpit articulation gimmicks, so in the waist then, for the skirts, these skirts will be able to flip up 90 degrees for the front skirts. The side skirts can flip up about 45 degrees. Before we get into the claws now, the back skirts do come together on the runner in very high-grade fashion, so you can clip them apart for individual articulation, and they can get about a 135-degree raise. Now in the claws then, of course, they can rotate backwards like so, but the main way to use them is you like kind of flip them out and forward like so, and then you can like open up the claws and do all that good stuff and rotate them. And there's a decent amount of articulation in general to have the claws being aimed at whatever you would want them to. And when not in use, they will just fold back up and flip to the side, like so. In the legs then, there is a hip drop mechanism. So for maximum articulation, you can slide both of the legs down all the way. And for front kicks then, if you twist the knee out of the way, you will get over 90 degrees forward, just under 90 degrees to the side, and just over 90 degrees backwards. So above average kick articulation for sure. Just be careful you don't pop the skirts out of their sockets. You will of course get full rotation in the top of the thigh. There is another articulation gimmick here, where if you slide down this rear thruster there, it gets out of the way to allow for the double joint in the knee to give over 90 degrees of bend. In the feet then, there's going to be toe separation to allow for the transformation, but you can't tip the toe down independently quite far. In terms of the whole foot then, you need to be careful not to pop it out of the socket. You can get some okay upward tilt, some pretty good downward tilt, some all right side to side tilt, but again, it pops out very easily, so just be careful. And in terms of pivot, you can get a pretty minor pivot, maybe 30 degrees to either side out of the feet. So in general, articulation is surprisingly good in this kit. You just need to be careful you don't over-articulate things so you don't like pop the skirts out or pop the arm off or anything like that, because a lot of the articulation is going to be used in the transformation. So we'll see the articulation in action in some poses. So getting the full mechanics Raider Gundam into a bit of a spin, starting with the usual running and gunning pose. Of course, this is out of the booth because, like I mentioned earlier, the backpack especially takes up a lot of space when the wings aren't folded up and it isn't sitting straight vertical on the Raider's back. So here it is out in the open with my ring light shining on it just to make sure it has proper lighting. And this kit actually can balance pretty easily on one leg when the backpack is on it. When the backpack is on it, it becomes impossible just because of how unbalanced the kit becomes. The backpack does add quite a bit of weight to this kit, and it does look pretty natural in this kind of pose. The articulation is pretty good. The only thing that I would say is limiting is the kind of rotation in the arm. You being forced to rotate the shoulder to the front makes it look pretty bad if you have like the arm kind of being thrown backwards as it's running, and in addition, the Ahura Mazda claws on the, well, mounted to the side skirts, but more on the back of the Raider Gundam, really does limit how far back you can kind of twist the arm to show the motion. But in general, I think the legs look really good. The ankle articulation does allow you to throw the leg a little bit to make it look a little more natural, and the cannon shield does look quite good being held in the hand there, in the trigger finger. In the video, when I was recording the accessory section, I had thought that you just use the standard holding hand on the handle, but no, you use the one trigger finger hand that comes in this kit. But yeah, it firing it off to the side does look pretty good. The only thing I think looks a little bit odd is that the shield itself is tilted at a slight downward angle, so you do need to lift the arm higher than feels natural to aim at a target. But that is pretty minor in the scale of things, and in general I think it does look pretty good in this kind of pose. And the Mjolnir spherical breaker also looks good fully retracted in the offhand like this, so this is definitely something I might consider posing this kit doing on the shelf if you have room, because on the stand you kind of have to compress this running pose a little bit, but if you have the room for it, you can definitely make a pretty cool diorama with the backpack coming into dock with the Raider and it running off and firing at something. So of course, to cover my bases, here is the Raider crouching with the shield up in a defensive pose, firing the Ahura Mazda claws up at a target. Now, this is one of the 3 times you'll see the claws deployed in this section. The second one, it will be during the conclusion, just as B-roll, when the kit's going to be in like a double Zeta Gundam high mega cannon firing pose that I tried to do, and the other one's when this kit's transformed. In general, the claws, while they kind of had to be included for full accuracy in this kit, I really don't like using them. They do tend to get in the way a lot with posing. This crouching pose, while the Raider Gundam would normally be able to hit this with no problem, because of the claws, they kept getting in the way of the arms and the legs in general, and the skirts kept popping off, so it's just kind of a mess to pose. While I appreciate the full inclusion of these claws for proper accuracy and posing options, actually working with them is a different story. They're definitely a lot easier to deal with in mobile armor mode when nothing's in the way. In mobile suit mode, I would say just don't bother posing the claws. They are very annoying to work with, especially if you keep the backpack on. Having to kind of maneuver them around the backpack's wings is also very annoying, and I was very worried something was going to break with how I had to kind of like twist them around it to get them around the arm and around the wing, and folding the back was also a bit of a problem. In addition, I think the pose you get out of it in this kind of crouching pose just isn't worth it. The Raider Gundam being a seed kit, being this like hyper-angular, very mobile kit with a very flight-oriented backpack, definitely looks its best in the air and not in this defensive crouching pose. So while this kit can pull off this pose, it is difficult to do and is way more trouble than it's worth, and the kit just doesn't look great, and I would not recommend doing anything like this on your shelf. So of course, getting it in the air here, kind of whipping back the Mjolnir spherical breaker here with the wire fully extended, and this pose is alright. I found that the wire does have a bit of trouble maintaining any kind of super dynamic curved shape like a lot of other wires do in, like, say, high grades or something like that. In this kit, the wire does tend to kind of, like, I guess become like softer with its angles and be less extreme. It probably won't be an issue if you pose it on the shelf, but on the spinning base, because of the limited amount of space I had to work with, the hammer kept wanting to get like yanked off to the side and tip the base over, so it's out of frame, but I actually do have the base of the Mjolnir's stand pinned underneath the action base 4 that the Raider is on, just to get it to stay still, so balance might be an issue if you don't have the space to properly pose this kit swinging the Mjolnir. Now this pose does look really cool. It's probably like the coolest thing the Raider can do in terms of a dynamic action pose, just kind of whipping the Mjolnir around. You can also pose it like thrusting the Mjolnir out and act like the Mjolnir's using the thrusters in it to kind of fly forward at a target. It's just such a versatile tool, and the ability to reel in the wire, I know I gushed about it a lot earlier, I'm going to do it some more, is just an awesome inclusion for this kit. Not needing to pre-cut the wire, which would severely limit your posing options during the building of this kit, is actually really nice. And it does give you the option to do plenty of experimentation and things like that and find what you like this kit doing best. So yeah, I cannot recommend posing the Mjolnir like with the wire enough. It is such a cool option, and you can definitely let your creativity kind of play out with how you decide to pose it. Definitely something I recommend doing on the shelf, and is definitely how I, and probably most people, are going to wind up posing this kit if you have it in mobile suit mode. But of course, mobile suit mode isn't the only thing to this kit. Here is mobile armor mode, and I'll get it out of the way right now. I think this looks horrible. It is such a goofy mode. Like, this feels like a goofier version of something like the Re-GZ's transformation, where it just kind of scrunches itself up and relies on a backpack to kind of carry the fact that this is supposed to be like a high-speed fighter slash aerial like combat slash transport configuration of the mobile suit, but this kit's backpack covers up significantly less of the mobile suit than the back weapon system of the Re-GZ's does, and it looks significantly less cool in my opinion. So a lot more of the mobile suit is exposed, and this feels a lot more like something like the Wing Gundam's transformation, where it's just kind of scrunching itself up underneath a wing pack, and I think it looks pretty awful in general. And this is kind of compounded by how simple the transformation is. A lot of transformations are pretty involved for these kits that have mobile armor modes. This kit, not so much. It's really just the shoulders open up to reveal the machine guns, they flip down over the arms, the legs kind of fold up into this reverse thing so the thrusters can come up in line with the backpack. That is literally it. There are some locks in the legs to prevent things from looking super unnatural. The action-based adapter that clips onto the taint of the kit also doubles as a lock for the thighs that kind of clip into them to hold the legs together, and each of the lower calf sections has a little tab in the side that also lock together to hold the legs together. So while I do appreciate how easy the transformation is, and I do like the locks being there to help it look kind of, I guess, as natural as it can with how goofy this transformation is, I think in general the transformation looks pretty horrible, and unless you're going to pose this kit with the Calamity riding on top, which, again, I'm going to take a look at that at some point in the future, make sure to sub in the notification bell so you don't miss that video when that comes out, I would say there's not really a reason to do this. There are some action options you can do while this kit's mobile armor mode. You'll see that in the conclusion section, but in general, I think this is just not interesting enough to bother posing by itself. So in conclusion, the Full Mechanics Raider Gundam is certainly an interesting kit. While I'm personally not a big fan of the design, it is a pretty faithful recreation of the Raider Gundam in a 1/100 scale, and this is probably the closest we will ever get to a master grade of the Raider Gundam. Now, in terms of the build, this kit sits in between an RE100 and a master grade in terms of complexity. It's not like a scaled up high grade or anything, but you are missing some key features of the master grade line, like a complete inner frame, working cockpit, hatch gimmicks, etc. This kit is a great example of the kind of core idea of what the Full Mechanics 1/100 line is supposed to be, where at a skin deep level it looks like a master grade. It feels like a master grade in the hand, it looks like a master grade, has all the detail of a master grade. It is a big, impressive, more detailed model that you could put on your shelf compared to a lot of the more, I guess, anime-accurate models that high grades try to be. So it's great on that front. On the inside, they simplify the frame drastically. Multiple frame parts that you would normally have to assemble yourself in a master grade are simplified into a single part if they're included at all. The inner frame is lacking in a lot of surface detail. There are plenty of voids on the inside on the inner frame. It is clearly not meant to be displayed at all or admired while you're building the kit. It's just kind of there for structural purposes. I would really be completely fine with this, but one, Bandai doesn't seem to really be interested in releasing full mechanics kits all that often. With master grade releases winding down, if they released more of these, I would be completely fine with it, but as it is now, I don't really see why they're so simplified if they're not releasing more of them to replace the master grades that they just simply aren't just releasing. In addition, the price is another big kind of detractor for my enjoyment of the Full Mechanics line in general. Now, I got this kit on sale for about $42-ish, which is probably what this kit should cost, because with the reduced simplicity and missing plastic that would normally be included in it with a full inner frame, having this kit normally retail in the States for $64 is ridiculous. This kit costs more than something like the Stray Red Frame Kai, which comes with like an absolutely like colossal amount of plastic with the tactical arms. And I really don't see why it's valued like that for this kit. So while the build is fine and solid, and I did enjoy it, it definitely falls a bit short when you consider the price tag. In terms of aesthetics then, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of being like skin deep, a master grade, this kit is essentially perfect. Color accuracy is very, very good. It has an incredible attention to detail, even down to like the insides of the thrusters, with one of them being navy blue and the rest being red, just like in the line art, which is pretty impressive. The inclusion of extra details on certain parts of the kit also really helps sell the, at a glance, you wouldn't be able to tell that this isn't a master grade, especially on the Mjolnir. All of that extra detail really does enhance it, in my opinion. Now, the Mjolnir is supposed to have thrusters and a bunch of machinery on the inside that just isn't conveyed in the line art and in other versions of the Raider Gundam, where it's just kind of a ball with spikes on it. Here, that really is conveyed, and it does look a lot more like the high-tech weapon it's supposed to be, instead of just a bludgeoning object, although a lot of the high-tech is just to increase its efficacy as a bludgeoning object, but I digress. In addition, I really do like how like a lot of Seed kits, I really do like how the proportions fix the very wonky line art that Seed tends to have, and the Raider Gundam definitely, like, proportionally looks quite good, and I do like a lot more of the mobile suit than I was expecting to going into this, considering I'm not the biggest fan of the design. But yeah, aesthetically, it is essentially perfect, with great color separation, great part separation, at least on the exterior, with many frame parts kind of poking through to break up the colors quite a bit. All of the red accents on the skirts and things like that are all separate pieces, so it is great. In terms of accessories, this kit comes with pretty much everything you would expect it to, considering most of the weapons are kind of just integrated into the Raider Gundam itself. You get your two handheld options, your cannon shield and the Mjolnir spherical breaker, and you get a number of different adapters and things to facilitate posing the Raider in a number of different options. In the air, either mobile suit or mobile armor mode, to have the Mjolnir kind of flying around, to have the Calamity Gundam standing on top of it, which is definitely something I'm planning to try when I eventually get around to building that kit. And in general, I have no complaints with the accessories apart from the lack of swappable fingers that come with this kit. You get the two holding hands, you get your one trigger finger hand, that's it. I really wish they would include some open expressive hands, especially for the price you're paying for this kit. It really feels odd that they are not here. In terms of articulation, this kit falters a little bit on that front. The design of the very large shoulders does limit your arm articulation a little bit, especially off to the side. The torso actually has a little bit too much articulation in it, which means that in mobile suit mode, the heavy backpack does tend to kind of bend the torso back if you're using the kind of gimmick to pull the torso out to give it more articulation. That serves as a negative point, in my opinion. The skirts have pretty decent articulation, and the claws have an excellent amount of articulation. Unfortunately, though, the design of the kit kind of clashes with the ability to articulate the claws, with the backpack and the arms tending to get in the way more often than they do not. And the legs in general have some pretty solid articulation in general, especially for how kind of bulky the lower leg design is. And the transformation is pretty seamless and does look accurate to the show, although personally I really don't like the design of it. And while you can get a dynamic pose out of the mobile armor mode like you should be seeing now, with it kind of swooping down with the claws deployed and the little, what normally would be a cockpit hatch on the backpack opened up to reveal the, I think, 80mm machine gun, it does really feel lacking as far as mobile armor modes go. It really is just the Raider Gundam scrunched up with the backpack carrying it around. I really do not like how this looks, but would I recommend this kit? Yes, if it's on sale. So currently on USA Gundam Store, which is where I got my kit, the base price of this kit has been dropped down to about $48. I tacked on a 50% off coupon code when they were running a sale or something, so I paid $42 for mine, which is definitely around what you should be paying, somewhere in the $40 range. For $64, honestly, that price is not worth it for what you get in the box. I really would not pay that price for something like the Calamity or the Raider. The Forbidden, maybe, just because of how insane the backpack is on that kit. That is a lot of plastic, but for this kit in particular, I feel it is incredibly overpriced, and you should really only pick it up if it's on sale and if you don't hate the design, because I know the BIOS CPU Gundam designs are a bit polarizing to a lot of people. So that was my review of the Full Mechanics 1100 Raider Gundam. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like reviews like these, make sure to sub and hit notification bell. If you like this video, give it a like, and I'll see you next time with my review of the high-grade Desert Zaku Pink Panther Forces version. I'll see you then.